Right, so it's just turned a little bit after 1 o'clock. Might as well get started. Welcome everybody to this final governing body meeting of the NHS Tees Valley Clinical Commissioning Group. We may have some members of the public joining us later as the meeting goes on. I think everybody knows each other in this meeting and online, so I don't think we need to do introductions, particularly since we haven't got any members of the public or press present. So we'll crack on. I haven't got any notification of any other business.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Now there is one.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
The CCG assessment method.
Okay, so we'll do that slightly later on. I've had apologies from Hassan here. Joe's indicated that she's going to join us online, and there you are, Joe. Hi, welcome. So, as mentioned, possibly get a couple of public members joining later. Haven't joined yet. Any other business will be touched on at the end of the meeting. Any declarations of interest that anybody has with live meeting? No. So, moving on to the unconfirmed minutes of the two previous meetings. So, page 7 of your pack.
I'm almost certain I attended this meeting.
Sorry?
I'm almost certain I attended this meeting. I'm not on.
Apologies. So we'll get you inserted. Thank you. So page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, and 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So is everybody okay that was a true and accurate record of meeting? Not around the room. Okay. And that to the minutes of the specially inserted governing body. So page 28, 29, page 30, page 31, page 32, page 33, and page 34. Is everybody okay with those as a true and accurate? Let's get nods around the room. We've got some actions, most of them complete. One open action in relation to Health Watch, patient and public involvement update report. How's that going? Still open.
Chair, I can pick up some elements of that. In relation to the annual health checks being carried out in kind of those patients with learning disabilities, I think Mike really was picking that up, but we did advise of the success of the Tees Valley through this last year in relation to addressing the health inequalities around our learning disability community. In terms of the CCG locality team meeting not being arranged, there are arrangements for both points 2 and 3. We have met with Health Watch in Hartlepool and discussed some of the queries that were raised at that time, and have arranged to meet with Health Watch directly from an ICB perspective as we move forward.
Okay, so it's been largely signed off, so I think we can sign it off as closed for the purposes of the CCG. Nothing to be passing on to the ICB. Thank you, Karen. All the other actions are complete. Do you want to sort of touch on the action with Mr. Dennis, Karen?
Yeah, So following the last governing body meeting, we did offer to have a face-to-face meeting with Mr Dennis to answer some of his concerns and queries in relation to GP access. We've undertook that meeting this week. I've responded to a number of the queries and provided Mr Dennis some information to help his understanding, and also to look at some of the concerns he did raise in relation to GP access to services. We have received a notice of thanks this morning from Mr Dennis to both myself and Paul for meeting with him directly, but also to the governing body members for enabling him to attend the governing body meetings, which he's felt really helpful, and also to address his concerns in public and have a response to those concerns.
Thanks, Karen. And indeed, Mr. Dennis also said that he appreciated the opportunity to be able to attend the governing body meetings and to hear the discussions and the information provided by all of the team. So thank you very much, everybody. Okay, so action log. Moving on, and governing body integrated systems update. Dave and Mark. Dave.
Okay, thanks, boss. Quite briefly, I think colleagues know CCGs in England come to an end midnight tonight, and therefore ICB's come into effect from this afternoon. There's a whole procession of things underway tomorrow with the ICB being set up, so they're going meeting for the first time in public. It'll be meeting in public around the patch. So it's going to do a tour of the patch starting soon in the new City Hall tomorrow. It'll be one of those wonderful board meetings where it's all largely settled. So there's a whole lot of terms of reference and things to be agreed. That's the most exciting spectator sport, I would suggest. But it is available in the public. It will be made in public. Some of the there's more interesting papers that are there. There's a paper talking about the setting up of the integrated care partnerships and still called sub-ICPs, and then might change. There's been a bit of a pushback in terms of sub-named inferior to, which kind of get. The smaller geographical ICPs is probably two and we'll need to talk about. There's also a detailed quality and performance paper that's going now, which is useful. There's a statement of intent / call to action in terms of health inequalities, which I think sets the tone for what the ICB will be about. And there's a useful and quite readable engagement paper there about public engagement and involvement as well, which again sets the tone for how things will work. There's some work ongoing. All staff and CCGs are ready to transfer across in a tube-like transfer to the ICB. The work on the so-called phase 2 is coming to a conclusion this week, so we'll be appointing those some clarity to those individuals, but importantly as well to the teams that are brought into them, so that will be completed. The work that's on a slightly slower going is work on the clinical involvement, or clinical strategy and clinical leadership strategy, with Brian and Purdy, the Chief Minister, leading on. And that will be engaged, we'll start engagement, will be moving forward, because that will give some clarity and I think help people see how some of the really good work that CCGs are doing in terms of clinical engagement and leadership will continue and will be built upon going forward. So probably not much more to say than that, other than obviously the ICB's got an awful lot to build on from all the CCGs, but certainly on the Teams Valley CCG point of view, there's some great work that will continue with the auspices of the ICB because of the work of people in the organisation. And so thank you to people for that. Happy to take any questions and comments.
Any questions or comments or queries? Is it worth picking up a tiny touch in relation to quality and safety being picked up by the ICB?
That's probably part of the paper that's going on, but quality and safety will definitely be picked up. There's a process being organised for providers who are underperforming, shall we say, which on our patch includes a number of providers to or something that's part of that as well. So, there'll be a process with monthly monitoring, and indeed that's starting next week. And Craig does some work on the ambulance handbook work at South Tees Hospital. It's been on the ambulance.
It's good that the work that's being done by
not just our clinical commissioning group, but all the other clinical commissioning groups in relation to quality and safety is going to be appropriately picked up.
Yes, and it'll be visible to the board across North East North Cumbria, which is One Health. But it'll also then be overseen and delivered very locally as well, which is really helpful. So the granularity there, plus one of the advantages of a large scale ICB is actually all providers can think on the providers are doing, which is going to help us. So it should be interesting to see how that goes.
Dave, last opportunity for questions or observations? Okay, moving on, governance and assurance report, over to you, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah. So this report is an update since the May governing body meeting. I won't go through everything that's in the report, I'll just highlight some elements. So in terms of due diligence, since the last meeting, a letter of performance was provided to Sam Allen, the ICB from Dave, our AO. So that's now been reported to the CCG committee as well. The quantitative data in terms of the due diligence work is still being collated, and you'll understand there are some elements that are uploaded today as a snapshot of where we are. So, for example, quantities of freedom of information requests. Some of the finance information will be completed after the event, so you will be familiar that we'll need to do a set of accounts for the 3-month period, so that will continue over the coming weeks. There are some excellent pieces of support that have been helping with this from the next project team. Expressed our thanks to them for that. The constitution for the ICB was signed off by all CCGs at their last governing body meetings. That's been to the region, and that's been signed off too, with no material changes from that we saw in governing body in May. In terms of the risk register, it's attached to this report. It's been reviewed and fully updated. We have increased the risk in terms of non-delivery of the financial position. It's relatively routine that we do that in the early part of the financial year. We keep it under review as we get more financial clarity. Particular issue this year in terms of some of the late information around allocations, and still some lack of clarity about future allocations in the second part of the year. So almost quarter 2 through to quarter 4. We will get finalised allocation figures for Tees Valley CCG over the next couple of weeks, and they'll feature in as part of the report for final accounts of the annual report for the CCG. And it's expected that that will show a balanced position for CCG. In terms of the annual report and accounts that we considered at the last meeting, they've been submitted to NHS England ahead of the deadline, and we've received confirmation that we do need to do a Q1 report. The timescales for that stretch into October, with audit of the accounts into next spring. So that will be quite a prolonged process, largely linked to capacity of external audit in terms of doing that work. And the final point is that the data security and protection toolkit, as mentioned in the report, has now been fully completed and was submitted earlier this week. So I think quite a positive report in terms of where we are with governance.
Thank you, Mark. So everybody's managed to get their data protection training done in time, properly. Excellent. Well done. Yes. So good. Any queries, comments, observations? You received the report, and we've previously signed off anything that you may need to tweak for future reports yourself and Dave, for anything that comes up after the CCG finishes its existence.
Yeah, there is one letter linked to the Q1 annual accounts, but we'll do that as part of the annual accounts process. So that in effect will be a letter from Dave to Sam at that point in time over the next few months. That's the only outstanding.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, moving on. Karen, Primary Care Network, end of year report.
This is presented for information, and we thought it was really important and timely, being the last day of the CCG, to highlight the success and the hard work of our practices working as primary care networks. Seeing as we saw the birth of them within the CCGs, we thought it would be really helpful to provide everybody members an overview of what the successful work that's been carried out and also some of the challenges. I won't go through the report in detail, but I think it's really important that last year we outlined, you'll be aware of this type of report, we provided one last year, and we outlined the incredible work that had been undertaken by the practices and working within our primary care networks. And this year, as we've reported it, far exceeded our expectations in the transformational work that still continued, whilst we were also responding to the pandemic and the delivery of the vaccine programme. And aside from that, the general services that GP practices provide on a day-by-day basis. So the report itself outlines who our clinical directors are, who are the clinical leads for our networks, which are groupings of practices working together under the auspice of a primary care network. And they also outline the success in the recruitment and some of the challenges in recruitment during this period to deliver new roles to work within primary care. And although there have been challenges, we have seen the workforce expand up until February 22 significantly, with an additional 158 full-time equivalents, front-facing clinical staff with a head count of 174, and that's all through a pandemic period. And as we've outlined to and responded to some public queries in relation to access to GPs, this demonstrates the work in general practice for the traditional model of GPs, moving away from that and having more specialist roles within primary care, working alongside of our GP colleagues. PCNs throughout this period have developed their own leadership, they've developed leadership within their teams, they've won a number of awards, as you'll see outlined in section 6, which is fantastic news for our practices and our PCNs to celebrate those types of successes. And they have absolutely been working collaboratively across the system, working with our local authority colleagues, working with our public health colleagues to address some of the significant health inequalities that we have within our area. So in conclusion, primary care networks will continue working in practices, working in groupings to evolve over the coming years. And it would also be remiss of us through the report not to recognise the support and the work that's happened through our local medical committee and our federations in supporting our networks and supporting ourselves as a clinical commissioner group in the delivery of what has been some very challenging times. So it was really just to highlight that to the governing body chair and to wish obviously our PCNs will to continue as they currently are, because they have been extremely successful.
Thank you, Karen. Any comments, queries, observations, David?
Thanks for that, Karen. It was in the national news today about the predictions of GP workforce for about 2030, about 25% will retire, and the new people coming in will really fill the gaps. And it's always, I think, been a bit difficult to know where we are in Tees Valley, knowing people's intentions for retirement and so on. Do we have any feel whether we're about average for the country or otherwise in that area looking forward?
So we are working through our training hub to look at our GP numbers. We are about average in terms of the number of GPs that are due to retire over the next 5 to 10 years. But as you say, David, I think the change in the way that the workforce will be delivered across primary care shouldn't be wholly dependent on just GPs as we move forward. And one of the things that we're doing with the training hub is looking at the whole workforce that's required across primary care as we move forward, and aligning that also with not only working in isolation from a primary care perspective, but working with our foundation trusts and how we can better utilise a staffing model across our patch to make sure that we're looking at a whole systems approach for workforce, not just within organisational boundaries. So we are about average for that.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to say, I mean, obviously we have the discussion at the Primary Care Committee, but this is a cracking piece of work, and it's been tremendous what's been achieved through the Primary Care Networks Act. what the team have done in addition to everything else that's been going on. I think as well, just looking at it through other stakeholder lenses as well, I think this document is really valuable because there's some great content in there. So just in terms of communications and getting it out there, I think this will be useful to share across all of the stakeholder groups that we work with, because I can imagine housing colleagues, people that work in education would find this document really helpful, and it really does tell a tale of what goes on and the extent of what goes on. So just really wanted to say that. Thanks very much.
My observation is that the work that the primary care networks have done with the support of the primary care team has put them into a good place to start working within the new ICB. And it's nicely structured, to my view, in that it also prepares them if necessary for a more place-based partnership way of working, if that's what arises in the future of the ICB. So on behalf of the governing body, again, thanks for all the work that the primary care team has done supporting the primary care networks. Because the primary care networks and the team as well has had to face all the challenges that COVID triggered in the process of developing, maturing their ability to do the work they need to do. So thank you. Janet, did I see your hand up?
I would just add to what you said, was, I mean, it is true, never waste a crisis. And COVID, certainly timing-wise, was interesting with regard to PCN development, but actually proved to be a great boon in many senses, because actually it enabled you to work together and think differently because you really had to, which, yes, you know, did give that extra added momentum. And yes, I think everyone would say that it's been exceptionally tough times in practice, as in, you know, many of the parts of the health and social care system. However, people really did knuckle down, and the phenomenal effort from all sides has just been really, really impressive. Yeah, there was a need to change, but it was, yes. So anyways, you don't quite have to see that again, but, you know, there's positives from it.
Thank you. Also taking the opportunity to note the fact that practices and primary care networks were very heavily involved in the delivery of the vaccination program, and noting the level of work that you had to put in, Janet, to support that side of the delivery process, you know, getting the whole vaccine, arranging supplies, informing practices in relation to what was available, where and when. So my thanks again to everybody who was involved in the vaccination from the primary care side. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Karen. Moving on then to Learning Disabilities Mortality Review. Jean, do you want to pick up anything there?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It's very quick canter through this because it's just for information, but I would, as you would expect, impressed upon colleagues taking the time to read it, because there's some really good stuff in there. This is the third annual report. Leader is a review and learning from deaths of patients who also have a learning disabilities diagnosis. I think the couple of really interesting points in this is, if you look at table 3.2, you can see how the team that works jointly across Durham and Tees Valley really punches above its weight in terms of numbers of progress in the reviews. These are important for families as well, because obviously much loved members and the timely turnaround. I think if you go to 6.1, we can see there, so that's on page 136 of the pack, causes of death for our patients, and not surprisingly, but also really quite upsettingly, you can see that COVID has had a major impact, and often this is because patients with learning disabilities have other comorbidities which increase their vulnerabilities, and despite that, but there's I hesitate to call it good news when it's a report into mortality. But if you look at the table on page 138 of the pack, so it's under item 7, age and time of death. Now what you will see there is there's a gradual shift towards more of your expected lifespan for many individuals, and we're finding now, although sadly some of these patients do die earlier than 3 score and 10, but actually we're finding that there are times, and you can see there's a few cases where we've reviewed people's death at 80 plus. So still an awful lot to do in terms of routinely improving things for this particular patient cohort. And I think that the report briefly references the linkages going forward in terms of the ICB accountable board that will be set up, the continuing linkages with the Learning Disabilities Network, and of course we have a local service improvement group, because it's good to have a look at these, but actually what are we going to do about them and make a difference. And I think if you look on section 10, you can, which is on page 1.4, you can see a big long list of the achievements to date in terms of improving, because that's the whole idea. But clearly there's still much more work to be done. This will be an ongoing challenge. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. Any comments, observations, and queries? We did, in fact, immediately prior to this meeting, have a meeting with the council members, and we were reinforcing and refreshing everybody's memories of the problems associated with learning disabilities and care, and the significance of monitoring and being aware of the associations of some of the long-term conditions that people with learning disabilities can have associated with their general condition, and keeping it in the forefront of our member practices minds for the future and rolling into the ICB.
And the annual health check is the cornerstone of a lot of the monitoring and surveillance. But one of the benefits of the leader mortality reviews, we link with local authority colleagues, we link with acute trust colleagues and others. So it's that whole system approach about how do we support a particular population cohort to actually live the best life, live in their best health as well. So the annual health check is just one component of that. And tremendous progress has been made in terms of completion against the registers. We need to make sure that the registers represent 2% of the population. And then also, as our learning disabilities clinical lead has said, we need to look at the quality of those. But definite progress made to date. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jean. Last opportunity for observations or questions there. Moving on. So, next, research and evidence annual report. That's there for information only. Any queries, comments, or questions there? No. And then we've got other items to note. The executive committee minutes. Anything to flag from those days? No. Any questions? Audit and assurance committee. Anything to flag there? No. Quality committee, David?
I flagged to Lynn that quite a number of us who were at the meeting weren't listed in the attendance. I was there, but not listed as representatives from North Tees and also South Tees, so need to be included.
Thank you, David. Yeah, because it's useful to note that when we have significant attendance from providers at our quality meetings, that it is recognised. Thank you. Primary Care Commissioning Committee, anything to note? No. So, rising, Dave. You any other business? Well, sorry.
Yes, and colleagues will be aware, we've circulated this now. We received on the 23rd of June a letter from NHS England, which is their assessment of the CCG. Probably similar to last year, but unlike previous years, it has been quantitative, it's more qualitative. There's a narrative there. It assesses the CCG against 6 areas, and I think actually reads really fairly. It is a good indication of how well the CCG has performed despite challenging circumstances over the last year. it's been causing a bit of uncertainty around moving to ICB work, and I think it's a good reflection of the hard work that everybody in the CCG, everybody's associated with the CCG, and indeed the governing body for its leadership of the CCG has undertaken over the last year. So it's there for information. I think we should append it to the minutes.
Put it on site as well.
For record, but just to thank everybody for their input in getting that result.
Thank you, Dave. Do we need to put that letter into the text of the minutes?
I think we could append it to the minutes, yeah.
It'd be nice as a last action for the CCG. Thank you. So, come to other minutes received, Northern Joint CCG Committee. Dave, anything to mention there? No. So, I'll quickly run through the other bits before I come to the thank you to the governing body. Any other business we've done? We do have Nick Marco online now, so congratulations, Nick. You've actually managed to stick with us through a lot of our governing body meetings, and particularly this last one. So, Nick, any questions from yourself or observations before we conclude the meeting?
No, nothing from me. Thanks again for just having us in all the meetings, being interesting and informative. Cheers.
I'm glad you found them informative and interesting. We hoped that we would sort of get as much public engagement with the meetings as possible, and actually that's slowly evolved over a period of time. And I think Zoom and Teams have kind of made it easier for obviously people who are digitally have digital means available to be able to attend the meeting. So perhaps it's something for the ICB to reflect on as to how they increase engagement with their meetings in the future. Okay, I don't think there's any impact on the risk register, no, but we considered it. So it comes to me now to say thank you all very much for all the time you've put into the governing body and the CCG and the support you've given me, the CCG, and helped us as a CCG to commission well for the population that we've served, and take on the responsibility for what Mark said earlier, a really significant budget as well that we've been handling, over £1.5 billion. But some of you have been here right from the beginnings of CCG time. Some of you are newer, but it's been a pleasure working with all of you. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here as chair. And I hope you found it as rewarding a thing to do as I have for all these years. And wrapping up this last clinical commissioning group meeting, thank you very much, Dave.
Can I echo that? Everybody, particularly calls about yourself. So thank you for your chairmanship, not just of this combined CCG, but the predecessor CCG and the arrangements over since the start of CCG, from about almost 10 years. So thank you, everybody. It's been a privilege working with everybody, but of course, particularly with you as chair. So thank you.
Thank you very much. There'll be more detail and more celebration coming shortly at the CCG celebration event that we've got coming up just in the local hall just down the road here. We've made sure that we kept it local and supported the local economy here as well. So for all of you, thank you very much, and I thank in their absence all of the people who've been involved in the CCG and the governing body, because it's been, as you said, over 9 years, nearly 10 years of CCG time, and it's been a variety of configurations of CCG. From I remember we started off in Hast, Hartlepool and Stockwell-on-Tees, and then joined with Darlington, and then joined with South Tees. And there's been a lot of people who've provided a lot of dedicated, useful, critical, crucial work, both from the governing body, both from the CCG staff, and from our commissioning support organisation as well. So thank you again, and I'll stop wittering on. Thank you. On that note, we'll wrap up, and then we'll head on over to the celebration event. Please do join us. It'll be fun.